Hello, my name's Chris Mortlock. I'm a third year medical student at Warwick University. I've just finished phase 2 of the course and I've started SSC2, which is a component of phase 3 that allows us to do some independent research. So before I came to medical school, I studied music and then I worked as a composer and a teacher for 2 years. I joined Warwick when I was 25 and I'll be 29 when I qualify.
What made you decide to switch career?
Okay, so I should start by saying it was a number of things. There was no moment when I decided, okay, yes, I want to do medicine. When I was younger, actually, I had no interest in medicine whatsoever. I was very interested in music. I did do physics for A-level and maths, but biology and chemistry meant nothing to me. But a couple of things happened between school and now that slowly accrued, I think. So I had a close family bereavement when I was 16. And at that point I'd already chosen what I was going to do, but it did obviously get me thinking about what I wanted to do with my life after university. Studying music was fantastic for me. I really enjoyed it, but I did think about what I wanted to do, and I actually decided I wanted to be a composer. I wanted to work either in film and television music or just writing music for the sake of it and hoping people would play it. But after university, I taught, and because I was teaching rather to support myself whilst I was composing. And whilst I was teaching, I found that I really enjoyed the work with people, and that I couldn't imagine doing a job that didn't involve people. And also, whilst I was teaching, I did a residential holiday for children with learning difficulties. They had a range of difficulties. Some had Down syndrome, some had autism, and I really enjoyed the caring aspect of that job. I've now done that holiday 3 times. I had to miss it this year because of my exams, and I was really gutted. But I'll continue to doing it. I will continue to do it as much as I can. And I think just those things just slowly stacked up, and I started to look at things in healthcare, and I looked at many things. I did look at nursing, I looked at medicine, and actually it was just medicine that interested me more overall. So I had to explore medicine as well. A friend of mine managed to sort me out some work experience at Adam Brooks, and I did a week with an oncology registrar, and that was absolutely amazing. He was really kind. He made sure that I got into quite a lot of very interesting clinics. He answered a lot of my questions, and so I feel I did have a reasonably good understanding of a doctor's timetable, what's expected of them, what are their jobs throughout the day, that kind of thing. I also did a week in a GP practice. Again, incredibly useful. It was very different. It was in Devon, it was quite rural, but I got to see the patient base, the common problems, things like that. Really useful. I did St John's Ambulance for a bit. I didn't do it for particularly long because I got my offer from Warwick, and then I continued for a bit, but then I sort of wrapped it up. But again, very useful because you see a totally different side of things. You get the first aid training, which is useful. And what else did I do? Well, I don't know if it counts as work experience, but the residential holidays for children with learning difficulties was probably the most useful thing I could do, because that was the holiday requires you to provide 24-hour care, basically. And so I learnt that I could be woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning to come and help do something, and that I could cope with that, and that I still had energy the next day, and that I was still able to be an empathetic, functioning adult. That was a really useful learning experience, actually, just to see what it is to be sleep deprived and can you still be nice. So when I was 23, when I just started teaching, I studied chemistry A-level independently because I thought it might be something I would need for the course, and I was also thinking that I might do an undergraduate course if I couldn't get onto a postgraduate one, and obviously A-level chemistry would be a requirement. I thought it was useful to do because there is a little bit of chemistry in the course, although it's very minimal actually. And it also taught me that I did like the sciences, and that it was a useful learning experience. But it was pretty tricky to do because obviously I had to learn it myself. There were some problems. I couldn't do the practical work because I wasn't attached to a centre of higher education. I just did the exams through a local sixth form college. so I could only submit module marks and things like that. It was tricky, definitely. I don't know whether I'd recommend doing it, to be honest. It was useful for me because it was a learning experience, but it's yeah. Sorry, that is basically how I feel about it.
That's fair.
How did it feel to leave an established career and switch to medicine?
Yeah, okay. Well, it was really scary, and it was very sad because I loved my job. It was a fantastic job. The kids I was teaching were really, really lovely, and I got to conduct, write music, work with the syllabus because it was an independent school, so there was a degree of flexibility in terms of what we were teaching. It was a really great job, and I was worried because I was starting something that I didn't know as much about as other people, I'm pretty sure. You know, because there are obviously people that wanted to do medicine from a very young age, and I was sort of moving sideways into it. But I did think, worst case scenario, it would be awful, but I would, even if, what would happen is if I really didn't like medicine, which would be terrible, I'd still complete the course, and then I could go back and do something else. And obviously I really didn't want that to happen because it would be such a waste of time and money. But I did know I had something to fall back on. I could go back to teaching if I didn't like medicine. But fortunately, I think it's fantastic, and I know I've made the right decision. But I can't pretend I wasn't worried.
What have been the easiest and most difficult parts about coming to medical school?
Okay, so I'll take them in reverse order. Okay, so the hardest one first. So I think it's fair to say a lot of things were quite hard. But if I had to just pick one, what I found was I had to basically change how I learned. So the way I used to prepare for exams particularly was I would just read, and I would make notes, and sometimes they were extensive, but I didn't have to do a lot of rote memorising. It was more to do with, did I understand key concepts? Could I form arguments? Could I write an essay? When I started trying to do that for the Warwick stuff, I just found things just didn't go in. So by about Easter of the first year, I basically had completely changed how I was working. So I was making flashcards, and I was walking in figure of eight in my room and just reading things again and again, trying to get them just rammed into my brain as effectively as I could. And it worked in the end, but it was definitely a very uncomfortable experience. So if I had to pick an easy part, and I would stress that none of it is easy, but I was pleased to find that the concepts we were learning, though they were difficult, there was nothing that was too conceptually tricky, which I was really pleased about, because something I was worried about is that not only would the content be, there'd be too much volume and too much breadth, I wouldn't have time, so that was a major concern. But then I also thought, well, okay, so I've got no time, but I also am not understanding this quickly enough. And what I found was that it's understandable relatively quickly, and I think that helps. And then it does just become a game of how much can you cram into your head in a short space of time.
So to quickly touch on that then, was any of that upsetting for you?
Yeah, because it made me feel really stupid. It was really difficult because you do get stuck in your ways when you're learning. And I don't know if it's an arts science thing, it may just have been me, but I was very comfortable with the way I learned, and I was incredibly frustrated that it wasn't working. So yeah, it was upsetting.
What's been your favourite element of the course so far?
So in terms of our lectures, cardio and respiratory medicine have been a real pleasure to learn, because they kind of make sense to me, because it's basically just flow and tubes. It's not particularly complicated. A lot of the other stuff we learnt, especially the neuroanatomy, was very, very complicated, and sort of defied reasoning sometimes. And so yeah, I found cardio and respiratory much more compatible with the way I think. I actually really have enjoyed learning the anatomy as well, because it's the learning of it is relatively straightforward, because you are just remembering names, but sometimes the names have interesting derivations, and you can go back and look at why something's called that, and sometimes that's quite interesting.
So what's your favourite named anatomical structure?
So this part of the ear, I think, is called the tragus, which means goat, and I can't remember if it's Greek or Latin, so I won't try and bluff it. But apparently it's because this part of the ear grows lots and lots of tufts of hair, and so it looks like a goat's chin. So I think that's probably my favourite.
What do you like to do in your spare time?
So university-wise, I'm on the Student Seminars Committee, and we provide PAS learning for the years below. That's been really, really fantastic because that's given me a chance to not only teach again, but be part of the committee that provides that service, if you like, for the years below. I also play squash. There's a medic squash team. I haven't actually been yet this year, but I did play last year, and I will go again. I've actually just auditioned for a choir locally, and I'm waiting to hear about that, but I'm hoping to start singing in that again because it's something I used to do that I couldn't really do in the past 2 years because I didn't have time. But I think there may be some more time for that this year. Just in terms of free time, I play music. I like playing the piano or guitar. I still do compose sometimes, but I don't have lots and lots of time for that. But I have a friend who has recently sent me quite a lot of poems that he's written, and we're going to collaborate on something together, so I think that'll be really cool. But yeah.
Who's your favourite composer?
He's called Thomas Aders. He's a contemporary British composer. He's an absolute genius. Look at his stuff, it's brilliant. It's not widely known.
Who's the most overrated classical composer?
Great question. Overrated. Can I? Okay, so not a classical composer, but I can tell you who I think the most overrated composer is, and that's Hans Zimmer. Because from my perspective, he's completely wrecked film music for everyone. I know, controversial opinion, but I think imagination in film music has died a death in the past 20 years, and it's not his fault. He's forged a style that everyone really likes, but now everyone copies that. So, there'll be 40 blockbusters released in a year, and all of them will have a Hans Zimmer style soundtrack, and it's just boring.
Have you thought about a specialty or plans for the future?
Yeah, so in the immediate future, I want to apply for academic foundation programs for my F1. And the academic foundation programs, they give you a chance to develop skills alongside your foundation skills that you'll learn in F1 and F2. And they are quite competitive, and so yeah, it's a hope that I'd like to get in, and I'd want to do it in medical education. So I would spend 2 years basically learning how to teach medicine, maybe to medical students, and then hopefully one day to foundation year doctors or medical students in a university, maybe. I would really, really like to be a clinical education fellow. At Warwick, we're taught by, we call them CEFs, but they're clinical education fellows, and they provide a lot of our early clinical teaching and in our trusts, and they're really, really helpful. They take you through histories and exams, basically, on the ward, and I think that would be a really great job. So in terms of specialties, jobs for the future, I'm really interested in orthopaedics, and that's relatively new. I had a really, really great 10-week surgical placement, and my consultant was an orthopaedic surgeon, and I really, really loved that placement. Something I've been interested for a while is paediatrics, which I also think would be an amazing job. Both of those jobs I know are very competitive, very draining, but hugely rewarding, and I don't know which one I really want to follow next, or follow in the future. Although I did actually meet a paediatric orthopaedic surgeon at a surgery day, so maybe there is a niche somewhere for me.
What advice would you give to someone who is in a similar situation to you?
And hoping to apply for graduate medicine, yeah. Research it properly, and I know that can be difficult to do, but make sure that you've spoken to doctors about what their job is, so you're clear about what you potentially are sacrificing, and look at all your options. So yes, Warwick is a postgraduate programme, but there are many, many more programmes that run alongside undergraduate streams. So yeah, make sure that you know what kind of courses you can apply to.
If you could go back in time and go to med school at 18, would you do that?
Definitely not. I think the experiences I've had, not in my previous degree and in work, have meant that I'm much more able to do the course and to handle the material. I don't think at 18 I would have survived an undergraduate medical programme. I'm really glad I came to it late. I'm not saying it's been easy, but that's the way round I think I should have done it.
When you were applying, what worries were going through your head?
Yeah, I think the key thing is that I was just really concerned that I wouldn't be able to cope. And I mean that in many ways. I mean, I don't know if it's a fair impression, but the impression I had before I started medicine is that, you know, doctors seem to be amongst the brightest in society. They're held to a very high standard, morally also. They don't get any sleep. They quite often don't see their families. And so it wasn't just, do you want this? Is this something you want? It was also, you know, are you good enough? Will you cope with the course? Will you cope with the lack of sleep? You know, will you cut it, basically? That was my biggest concern. Would I be good enough? And another thing, money is also a big concern when you're going to do another degree. So I did a lot of looking into this, and I know that student finance are there to help if you get into a postgraduate course. The NHS pay a third of the fees, student finance cover the other 2/3, so it was just living expenses, and so that had to come from my work. And I was really fortunate in my job because it was a boarding school, and I lived in the school and I ate in the school and I used the school Wi-Fi and the school power, so my overheads were pretty limited, so I was able to save. And so in that respect I was just really lucky with my job. I think if I was doing anything else I'd have had to have saved for quite a bit longer.
Has anything about the process been not quite what you expected?
It's been really nice to realise that the doctors I've met, although incredibly competent, very nice, they are just normal people with flaws, and I think it's interesting, I think it's slightly unhealthy, the view we have of doctors, because we put them on a pedestal. And I know why we do that, and it's useful for us as a society to say the people that are looking after our health are like this. You know, it's a nice thing to think. But actually, to see it from this side, I'm not saying that there aren't brilliant people in medicine. There are. It's full of brilliant people, but they're also normal people. And as a normal person it's nice to feel like you don't necessarily have to be completely outstanding. You have to be good. You have to be keen. But yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope it was useful. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. My email address should be on the screen now, and it will also be in the description below.